In today's video, I'm going to teach you 3 things you need to do if you want to improve your English quickly. And by quickly, I don't mean in a week or 2 weeks, because unfortunately, it does take a lot of time to become fluent in a language. But I can promise you that if you do the 3 things I'm going to teach you in today's video, you will be able to see a big improvement in your English confidence and fluency in a relatively short period of time. Learning a language can be extremely difficult, but unfortunately, lots of people make it more difficult than it needs to be. In fact, learning a language doesn't need to be difficult. You don't need to make it complicated. You just need to break it down into manageable chunks that make it less overwhelming and less stressful. And there's a 3-step formula that I use with the students in my programs, which helps them go from feeling stressed about learning English, feeling shy, feeling embarrassed, to feeling more confident, feeling more fluent, and being able to express themselves in English the way they want. Now, I divide this formula into 3 parts. The first part is to learn vocabulary, learn grammar, learn the rules. The second part is to practice those rules, to actually put them into practice. And the third part is to get feedback and to get corrections on anything you do. Now, you don't need all 3 of these parts. You certainly need the first 2. The third part, which we'll talk about a bit later, is optional, but it will really help you improve your English a lot faster. Now, when I talk about the first part, which is learning vocabulary, learning grammar, and learning the rules, this is something you can do on your own. It's something you can do by watching YouTube. It's something you can do by watching movies. But one thing I strongly encourage is to read. You have to read. Reading is probably the best way to expand your vocabulary, to learn new words, and most importantly, to see how those words are actually used in context. Because honestly, if you go out and you try to memorize a dictionary, you're not going to see much progress because you can't actually see how those words are used in the real world, in real situations. And that's where reading can really help you, because you can learn new words, but you can also see how they're used in context. So read, read, read. Reading is seriously one of the best ways to expand your vocabulary. A lot of students ask me, what books should I read? What are the top 5 books, top 10 books that one should read to improve their vocabulary? And honestly, I don't really like this question because it's very hard for me to give a straight answer. Honestly, this depends on you, depends entirely on your personality. I know some people love reading fiction. Some people love reading nonfiction. Personally, I prefer nonfiction myself, but a lot of people don't like nonfiction. And if you don't like something, it's going to be harder to pay attention. It's going to be harder to concentrate. And ultimately, you're going to give up after a few weeks. So whatever you read, whatever you watch, and whatever type of content you consume, it has to be on a topic or a subject that you actually enjoy. It should be something you do in your native language. If you don't watch movies in your native language, then I don't recommend watching movies in English. If you don't read books in your native language, I don't recommend reading books in English. Obviously, you can give it a try, and I do really encourage that. If you are somebody who likes reading, reading is by far one of the best ways to improve your vocabulary. But if you don't enjoy it, if you don't actually enjoy it, it's going to be a lot harder to stay motivated, to stay on track, and to make progress. So whatever you do, you actually have to enjoy it. That's priority number 1. Now, regardless of what you do, and again, I want you to do exactly what you do in your native language, but to do it in English, whether that's reading or watching movies or watching documentaries or listening to podcasts, reading the news, I want you to keep a journal. And in that journal, I want you to write 10 to 15 new words every single week. So in the journal, you should have a weekly entry, and you should have 10 to 15 words that you've learned or that you've acquired that week. I think 10 to 15 is generally a pretty reasonable number. You don't want to put 100 words there because it's going to get hard to keep track of them. It's going to get hard to remember them. It's going to get hard to actually use them in conversation effectively. So I would say 10, 15, maybe if you're feeling extra adventurous, you could go for 20. And you should write the definitions. You should write example sentences using those words. And those example sentences should be ones you would actually use in everyday conversation. So they should be relevant to your life. And then I want you to go and practice. I want you to make an effort to use those 10, 15, 20 words every single week in conversation. And this brings us to step number 2. You need to practice. You need to speak. You need to actually make an effort to use those words that you've learned. Because if you don't, you will forget them. You will not remember them. And there's no point in actually learning the words in the first place if you don't use them. Now, when it comes to practicing, obviously it's great if you can speak with native speakers. I know some of you have regular contact with native speakers at work if you live in English-speaking countries. Some of you don't. And that's also okay. The next best thing is to speak with people who speak English as a second language. There's nothing wrong with that. It can be extremely useful to do that because you do expose yourself to different accents, different ways of pronouncing things. And all in all, it will help you as well. Now, if you don't have anybody to speak with, whether that's a native speaker or a non-native speaker, then you can actually speak to yourself. This is something I do encourage. If you are alone, if you have nobody to speak with, you can practice having conversations with yourself alone in front of the mirror. And you can try to implement those words that you've learned in step 1 in those conversations with yourself. Obviously, this is not the most ideal thing, but if you don't have anybody to speak with, you can do this as well as a temporary measure. Now, I don't actually recommend AI for this step. And I know a lot of people will say that AI is good for learning languages. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. And I've talked about this in other videos. I'll leave a link down in the description below. But there is one really good use of AI that we'll talk about in a moment in step 3. So step 1, learn vocabulary. Step 2, use the vocabulary in conversation. And step 3 is to get feedback and to get corrected, to make mistakes and to have people tell you what you did wrong and how you can improve. Now, this is something that's a bit harder to do on your own. And this is why I do say, if you don't have anybody like a teacher or a friend who you trust to give you feedback, you can use AI. You can give ChatGPT or you can give any AI tool a sentence and you can ask it to correct you and to provide you with an explanation of what it corrected. It's honestly super important to ask it to explain its reasoning, because if you just see the correction and you don't understand why it corrected it a certain way, you're probably going to make the same mistake twice. So if you're using AI to help you, then please, please, please always ask it to explain why it gave you a certain answer. And I don't love AI for this purpose because sometimes it actually makes mistakes and this can give you more questions than answers. So obviously, if you have the opportunity, you need to speak with a real person, and that can be in the form of a friend. If you trust somebody, a native speaker or somebody more advanced than you at English who can give you that feedback, who can provide you with corrections, who can tell you when you make a mistake and how to fix that mistake. Obviously, the best option, the top level here would be to get a teacher. You can find lots of teachers online. If you'd like to study with us, we have several programs available that focus on correction, that focus on the 3 steps we've learned today: learning vocabulary, learning grammar, implementing it in conversation, in real discussion, and of course, also getting feedback and getting corrections. You can apply by clicking the link in the description below. If we think we can help you, we'll be in touch. But it's so important to get feedback if you can, because if somebody tells you you're making a mistake, you'll be able to correct it and you'll be able to prevent yourself from forming bad habits. One of the biggest risks of doing things alone is the risk of forming bad habits. It's the risk of making mistakes, not getting corrected, and then making those mistakes over and over again, which in the long run can be quite dangerous because you form these bad habits and they become very difficult to break. So if you are in a position to, I strongly encourage, once you're at the A2, B1 level, to get feedback, to get corrected, and to put yourself in a position where you can set yourself up for success in the future so you're not forming these bad habits. Well, there we have it, the 3-step formula to improve your English very quickly. If you follow these 3 steps, learn, practice, and correct, then you're well on your way to expanding your vocabulary and to becoming more fluent in English. I hope you found this video useful. As always, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to English at the Ready here on YouTube for more lessons. Your feedback means a lot to me, and I really appreciate all your support. Thanks so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you in the next lesson.